Good morning, everyone. Appreciate you coming. And my name is Michael Bruning. I am with the Better Business Bureau serving Chicago and Northern Illinois. I'm going to be the principal presenter, and Molly Arons is a representative from Smith Amundsen Law Firm. They are an accredited business with the BBB, and Molly has an expertise in cybercrime. So between the two of us, we're going to be your guides in this topic of cybersecurity and that. Now, I've talked to a couple of you. You're in businesses and industries. Some of them have been around for decades, and the type of industry maybe has been around, if you're a contractor and that, for centuries. We're going to be talking about an issue, cybersecurity, that really has been around for the past, first surfaced about 30 years ago, but it hasn't affected the wide variety of businesses until about 10 years ago. We're going to be talking about its impact because the impact that cybercrime has is growing every day. And that's probably one of the reasons why you're here, is to get some information about how to avoid cybercrime and how to practice cybersecurity. Now, cyber means digital, and digital is all around us. So cybercrime is something that is going to affect almost everyone in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to be giving you some statistics later on to explain the impact of it to businesses and to people. Look upon cybersecurity as a complement or as a parallel to security in your home or business. In your home or business, you've got locks on doors, you've got keys, you've got alarms, and basically the whole purpose of all of those is to make it as difficult as possible to keep that intruder, burglar away so they go somewhere else, okay? We all know that if somebody really wants to get into a house or business, they're going to get into it. But we don't want the people who just are looking for something casual to get access. That's why we have doors, locks, keys, all the rest of those things. That's one of the things that is in parallel with cybersecurity. We want to keep as many people away as possible. Now, Better Business Bureau serving Chicago and Northern Illinois. First, how many of you know about the BBB? Used its services? Great. You're probably aware of that you can search more than 400,000 businesses in the BBB database for a rating, for customer reviews, that sort of thing. So please do that. The Chicago BBB is one of 112 Better Business Bureaus in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It was founded in 1926. As I said, there's over 400,000 businesses that are accredited. And last year in the BBB system, there were almost 250 million instances of service. Here in Chicago, we provided almost 33 million instances of service to people, businesses across our service area. And instances of service means things like answering telephone calls, web searches for information, people who have attended our presentations, that sort of thing. They all come for the business reviews, and also we have charity reviews online. Now, basically the BBB serves two types of people, consumers and also businesses. The Better Business Bureau is a business organization, but it's designed to assist customers. The whole point of the BBB is trust. Buyers trusting sellers, sellers trusting buyers. You need trust in any kind of relationship. That's what we want to foster. That's what we want to encourage in business relationships. This is a resource that you can use, ask.bbb.org, if you want to search for a business, if you want to find a trustworthy vendor, If you want to request a quote from a vendor, such as your business needs a new roof, or you're looking for an IT vendor, go to askbbb.org and use the menus, it'll get you there. You can submit a review of a business that you've used. You can find out about scams, such as cybersecurity, and you can even make a complaint. Now, many of you know the BBB as more of a complaint agency than an educational institution. We're moving, where we still take complaints, but we would much rather educate people before there is a need for them to complain than handling the complaint after the fact. So please go to ask.bbb.org to learn more about our programs. And one of the programs that we have is the Torch Awards. Torch Awards is a method of rewarding good companies. You can go on the BBB website and nominate a business that you believe is a good business that's deserving of an award to receive the Torch Awards. Nominations are now open. It's a simple form to nominate a business. We then contact the business, let them know they've been nominated, and they can enter. So please, if you feel your business deserves a Torch nomination, a Torch Award, or you know of a business that is deserving, whether it's a vendor, a supplier, somebody you've used to, who did a good job cleaning your gutters. If you think they're good, nominate them for a Torch Award. So, with that as background of the BBB, what is the BBB doing with cybersecurity? Why are we interested in this whole realm of things? Well, basically because of this type of thing. These are actual ads from the early 1900s. Love potions and snake oil, the original cure-all, snake oil. The one that I like the best is fat banished through sanitized tapeworms, jar packed. Okay? These are real ads of real products that were being sold in the early 1900s. People bought this stuff. These were the scammers back in the 1900s. Okay? This is why the BBB was formed. Good companies got together to show that they didn't want to be associated with bad companies. That was the formation, the idea behind the formation of the BBB. So, now, we fast forward to today. The scammers have moved digitally. Now, there are still old-fashioned scam artists around. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of opportunities for these scammers now that there have been bad weather conditions in the northwest suburbs and Wisconsin, that sort of thing. Fly-by-night contractors who come in, say, hey, I'll repair your roof or I'll repair your basement, give me $500 for materials so I can buy them at wherever, okay? People give them $500, that's the last they ever see of the $500, that's the last they ever see of that scammer. Okay, they're out $500. So, there are old-time scam artists still around. A lot of them, though, have moved and proliferated on the internet and through the digital area. The simple reason is that it's very, very difficult to catch scammers in the digital world, and when you do catch them, it's very difficult to prosecute them. So, the BBB has a history of warning people about scams. And so we warned people about the snake oil salesman. We're now warning people about the modern snake oil salesman, cyber scams. Cybersecurity, fancy government-issued definition. Ability to protect, defend, use of cyberspace from cyber attack. Okay? Much easier to understand. Protecting your digital information. This is the key to what we're going to be talking about and the 5-step program that we're going to be talking about. How to protect your digital information. Now, we've got a 5-step approach to protecting digital information. This is not going to be a technical presentation. This is going to be an overview that you can use to take back to your business and take a look at your business and the vulnerabilities that it has through this outline. The first step is to identify the assets to protect. Then you got to figure out how to protect those assets. Now, the assets can be the hardware, it can be the software, and it can be the information in those items. Those are the three things that you need to take a look at and protect. And we're going to be getting into each of these in more depth. This is just, let's say, an overview of what Molly and I are going to be talking about. Then you need to set up a system to figure out how to detect when there's a problem. Okay? Then respond to the immediate situation. What do you do if your computer is locked by a ransomware attack? There are considerations that you need to do. Do you pay? Okay? Or if you've backed everything up, you just get a new computer. There are pros and cons to both those. You got to have a plan. You got to think about it ahead of time. And then finally, after you've responded to the immediate situation, you got to figure out how to recover. Now, one way of looking at this is this cybersecurity wheel. One thing that this illustrates is that it is an endless process. Just as we've seen software evolve, hardware evolve, the first iPhone or the first mobile phone. Anybody remember those bricks? And take a look at your iPhone 8 today. Quite a difference. Cybercrime has evolved. So we've got to take a look at it from an evolutionary point of view. Identifying, protect, detect, respond, recover. This also indicates that different sections of your business might be able to do different elements of these at different times. This is a way of keeping track of each step along the way. So this is going to be one of the illustrations you're going to be seeing. And as I said, this is a continuous process because it's not a question of if you're going to be hit by cybercrime. It's really a situation of when it's going to happen to you. So you've got to take measures to make sure you're preventing as much as possible it having an impact on your business. Again, as I said, this is parallel to lock on the door, keys, alarm system, all that. And if you take a look at that, identifying what you've got to protect, locking the door behind you, protecting your assets, detection methodology, an alarm system, they run in parallel. Okay. There. How big is this problem? Cybersecurity. Various estimates, various surveys have been taken, both business and government. In 2 years, it's expected to cost $2 trillion. This cost includes the cost to businesses of losses, the cost to businesses of protection, government, all that sort of thing. Now, based on surveys, businesses attacked in the last 12 months. This is why I say it's not a question of if you'll be attacked, but when. Based on surveys, if you have 25 or more employees, the chances are 1 in 3 you'll be hit, or were hit last year. And so 1 in 3, that's a continuous process. They're getting more sophisticated. You will be hit sometime. If you have less than 25 employees, chances are 1 in 4 that you were hit, and will continue, that ratio. Additional research. 70% of business owners are concerned. Okay, that's nice, but only 40% are comfortable with their efforts that they've taken. So less than half are comfortable with the steps that they have taken to protect themselves. Only 30% have a plan to notify people. And as we'll see when we get into the specifics, notification of the people impacted by a security breach is now becoming a legal necessity. Even more disturbing, a lot of businesses, 33%, think their bank will compensate them for losses. sorry. Banks have their own problems. And they can advise and that, but they're not going to compensate somebody for cyber crime losses. And most disturbing is that many, many business owners have a feeling that it cannot happen to me. It happens to somebody else, but it can't happen to me. The stats that I showed you, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, take a look around, take a look at the person next to you, to your left, to your right. Chances are one of you, if you're in a business, smaller than 25 employees, will be hit next year.
Mike, if I could interject for a
Yeah,
second. I was
please.
just going to say, actually, my 2 most recent clients that I've had for cyber breach cases have had less than 10 employees. One had actually 3 employees, and the second one, the most recent one I've had, was a business that only had about 10 employees. So it is the idea that it's not if it's going to happen, it's when, or the adage of there's 2 types of businesses: those that have suffered a cyber breach and those that will. So we are running into, I think, a lot of sticking your head in the sand mentality of, it's gonna be the other guy, but the reality is, I'm getting calls from clients, cold calls from people that are really scared because they, somebody went to Las Vegas and took a laptop that was stolen, and was it encrypted, was it password protected? We've got sensitive data on there. So it is really important that people, take this to heart and take this home to your HR and IT departments and talk to them about what protections you have in place.
Can I ask you a question? Okay, do they target also like nonprofit?
Oh, yes. Yeah, because nonprofits have employee information, especially HR. They're, it's the old story of, they want personal information so they can sell it. Any kind of an organization that has data about people, social security numbers, credit card numbers, that sort of thing. Now, the initial person, the hacker, stealing this information may not be the one to use it. He sells it on the black market to somebody else. So this is a business. Cybercrime is a business. Look back on the days of the mafia. That was a business. This is a business also. Now, last year, Verizon did a report about the patterns of different types of crime. I'm not going to go through all of these, but a couple points I want to highlight here. Physical loss. Molly said, lost laptop. You might have read about a car break-in in New York City a few months ago. Somebody broke into a Secret Service agent's car and stole his laptop, which had all the security for Trump Tower on it. Okay? Not good. Secret Service says, oh, everything was double password protected and all that. Wonderful. Hope it was. But it just proves the point. Anything can be taken. Okay? So, look at that. Insider privilege and misuse. This means disgruntled employees. Okay, I worked with a company where an executive was fired. He was fired, went back to his office. IT department was then called, get the computer. In the time span between him, that employee, going back to his office and the time of the IT department arriving to confiscate his computer, he took a screwdriver, physically yanked out the hard drive from his PC, put it in his briefcase, and left. Okay, it was a matter of minutes. Disgruntled employees are a problem. Now, employees can be the biggest culprits in cybersecurity, or they can be the biggest cures, the biggest assets, if they are trained properly. That's one of the things you need to take a look at, is, everybody thinks cybercrime comes from the outside. It can come from the inside of your organization too. What types of access do different people have on this equipment? That's one of the questions you need to ask, and why. Now, we talked about the 5-step approach and this wheel and that. I want to get into, and we're going to be talking about these elements, and if you have questions, give a holler now, and then we're going to open it up to questions after we review each of these 5 steps in greater detail. So as we're going through, ask them now, or we'll have a Q&A at the end. First, identifying the assets. Assets, fancy term for what do you have that you need to protect. It's the hardware, it's the software, it's the data. You need to take an inventory. Now, we have some handouts that I hope you picked up, and if you didn't, please pick them up ahead of time, or afterwards. This 5 Steps to Better Security has some of this information on it. Please take this back and review it for yourself, as well as review it with the relevant people who have access to your digital data. We also have a handout, the technology checklist. This helps you in looking at the different equipment and the different software you have, as well as how it might be accessed and that. So use these in tandem when looking at your cybersecurity efforts. Stop and think, what assets, what information do I have that could cause damage to the business, to your employees, to people, financial loss, if it was stolen or destroyed? Okay? Now, this, we're talking cyber now, but take a look at this from the other viewpoint of using this outline in your general business. If you have mechanical items, if you're in a factory, you can use much the same concept of identifying the equipment that you have. How do you protect it? Circuit breakers, how do you protect it from flooding, from damage, that sort of thing? What kind of alarms do you have on it? So there are parallels. This cybersecurity should not be something strange or frightening or divorced from the real world. It is part of the real world. It's part of business. That's the key idea here. This has to be integrated into your business thinking. What kind of central server do you have? What laptops, as Molly mentioned, cell phones, that sort of thing. You need to document the assets, document their location, and then locate all the key data. What kind of data do you have on all these different things? Once you figure out what you have, how are you going to protect it? Okay? As I said, doors, locks on doors, keys. Parallel is what protective measures can you take here. Now, I am not a software expert, a hardware expert, neither is Molly. This is something that you should talk to your IT provider about. If you don't have an IT provider, step back and take a look at where you bought your computer. I'm not endorsing anything, but Best Buy has the Geek Squad, AT&T has something called ConnectTech. Comcast has something similar if you don't have an independent IT provider. These are all options to answer more technical questions. So you need to protect the data against cyber intrusion, against physical intrusion, and against physical harm. Physical means like the story I told you about the guy taking a screwdriver to the hard drive. He wanted to take that data and steal that data from the company. So that's physical. Yeah?
I would also suggest, having been in banking technology 25 years, many times IT people are really good at what they do for you now, but this whole cybersecurity area is a whole set of information that's moving very quickly. So you may want to talk to other people who they're techies, but they're techies in this area. But you can get them to translate through your people.
Yeah, that's a good point, because as I mentioned, and as this wheel indicates, it's evolving. It's never ending. You got to keep on updating. And that, software, you need to put in the patches and the updates, and then eventually you have to buy the next version of the software. Cybersecurity is much the same way. Now, in terms of protecting, one of the best things you can do as a prevention against this type of intrusion is to back up your data. Don't let it sit in only one spot on only one computer. There's a rule that's been promulgated, that's been distributed about the 3-2-1 backup procedure. Okay, you make 3 backup copies on 2 different media, and you put them in different locations. Okay, so say you've got a customer list. You make 3 copies of that customer list. Maybe you make 1 copy on a CD. You make 1 copy on a flash drive, and you print out 1 copy. Then you keep one of those copies, at least one of those copies, off-site. Don't keep them in the same building, because if the building burns down, having those 3 copies is absolutely useless. Okay? So take one home with you, whatever. Lock it up, keep it off-site. If you remember the 9/11 attack in New York City, one of the big issues that the banks and trading companies were scrambling around for was all their data was on Manhattan Island. And Manhattan Island had a problem. Now all those banking companies and trading companies have off-island locations. Chances are both of them would not be hit by a terrorist attack again. That's the macro view. Micro view, back up your data, keep it off-site. If you want to keep it on a computer, that's fine, or a hard drive, but then detach the portable hard drive from your computer. Because if you get hit by a ransomware attack, that ransomware is going to travel to your connected hard drives. So having an additional hard drive, if it's connected, is useless.
Also, find out where they are geographically located. I asked some guys a question once, and they said, "Oh, we're 20 miles outside of New York, of Washington D.C." I said, "I'd rather have you in the middle of Nebraska, because Washington D.C. if something happens, their warehouse could be affected."
And in terms of keeping data, just remember, hardware does age. The typical hard drive lasts 3 to 5 years. So we're talking cybersecurity now, and not necessarily intrusion, but if your computer craps out, it might, and that's the only place where you have your data, boy, you're going to have a problem. Yes, sir.
What is your opinion of the cloud? Having your data on the cloud? I've always been suspicious of the cloud.
Well, my opinion is, the cloud is a wonderfully, creative term for a server farm. These server farms are in huge buildings, protected, but they are nothing but a server farm. There's aisle after aisle after aisle of servers, and they're probably a lot more powerful than your home server or your home computer, but they are physical things. They're not somehow protected by the angels up in the clouds. So, it is an alternate location, and if you investigate it and they have good reviews and you're confident, the cloud is one place that you can have a alternate location for your data. A lot of people are doing it. Because, frankly, it's in the cloud. You give somebody the password, they're able to get to it if you want to share your pictures, if you want to share data, that sort of thing. So, but, is it appropriate for you, for your business? Frankly, do you trust? Yeah, because remember, it's a server farm. Protecting, passwords, payment card systems, cybersecurity, cyber insurance, and all these kinds of policies that you can purchase now. And do you want to speak to any of
Well,
this?
I don't purport to be any sort of expert on insurance policies that are specific cyber policies, but I just wanted to emphasize that this can sometimes get lost. Businesses say, well, I have a CGL policy that has to have protections in place should we suffer a cyber attack. The reality is you want to investigate and look into specific cyber insurance, because lots of cyber insurance policies will pay for the response. You're breached. Who's the forensic analyst that we can bring in today to look at our data and see what was taken? Is that paid for, or are we paying for that out of pocket? Are there lawyers that they will pay for to help you deal with the response? So you want to, and this is something I think that a lot of lawyers have spoken to audiences about, is looking into cyber insurance, because there's specific policies, and generally speaking are ones that can pay for certain response steps that need to be taken that your CGL policy and some of your professional policies and that sort of thing will not pay for. So that is not a point to be missed, of looking into that issue, talking to an insurance broker. We have people at our firm actually that deal with insurance services and could put you in contact with specific carriers that do provide cyber policies. But that is something that I think a lot of companies still do not have, and then this happens and you're paying for all of the response and potential notification and a potential lawsuit possibly out of pocket, as opposed to having it be covered by an insurance policy.
So just as businesses have become much more focused and specialized, you can see legal insurance companies are more focused on the situations that are impacting their clients on a daily basis.
Oh, before we go on
Yep.
to the next segment, I also wanted to add, one of the things about protecting assets too, and I know Mike mentioned this, is training of employees. A lot of the time we're seeing the infiltration happens from an employee who just happens to click on an email or an attachment to an email, thinking it looks like it's from somebody that is reputable and honorable, and instead they click on it, and that's how they get an intrusion into their system. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I would say expand the word employee. What if you have a contractor, you have a consulting firm?
Yes.
Right.
A business, anybody who gets access, regardless, they don't have to be just a W-2.
Mm-hmm.
And also, and we always bring up, the target intrusion is the big one that everybody knows about, and that was a situation where it was an outside HVAC contractor whose credentials were compromised, and that's how the intrusion happened. And if it can happen to a target who had really sophisticated malware software in place that they didn't have activated at the time, it can happen to smaller businesses.
Yeah.
So be really careful to audit and evaluate your outside contractors. Who are they employing? What kind of insurance policies do they have in place? Because sometimes your outside contractors, and Mike mentioned this before, could be a really small shop that if they're the reason why you've been breached, they just fold up shop and they leave. There's no skin off their back for the fact that you've suffered a security breach. They can just move on or start anew or declare bankruptcy or otherwise. So you want to be very careful, not only with your employees that they're trained, but in auditing and evaluating your outside contractors.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to
Yes.
ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you say insurance services, what exactly falls under that?
For purposes of that sort of practice group, or just meaning like cyber policies?
Cyber.
And I, again, don't purport to know exactly the nuts and bolts of it, but from my understanding of it, it's a specific policy that, like I said, kind of itemizes this is what's covered. They'll cover, you call your insurance, you call or notify your insurance carrier that you've suffered a breach, and they say, okay, we've got this vendor in place, we've got that vendor in place, we've got these attorneys in place, let's connect you and get the ball rolling. Because a lot of what needs to happen, and we'll get into that next, is how quickly can you respond? And there's a need to reach out to legal enforcement, law professionals, the FBI and local authorities. And part of it is really, like I said, is as simple as, does the policy cover that? And they will have forensic analysts that can get in there and go through everything that's in your system and figure out this is what was breached, that was what was breached. You can sleep at night because it wasn't a widespread breach. And then they can work with your legal team to sort of evaluate, are certain state laws triggered by it? Do we need to send notification, or was it something where personally identifiable information was not breached as defined by certain states, et cetera, but instead of you shelling out thousands of dollars, the policy would cover it, and you would be able to have certain.
Like people's identity, like their social, when they use the card, the credit card, debit cards, and all of that, we need to let our employees let our customers know that this has been breached and?
That is something that would need to be evaluated by, because this, I've had a case, this laptop case that I was talking about, where, this company had a laptop stolen out of a hotel room. It did have access to a cloud, it was password protected. We worked with that client and said, okay, what would have been accessible? Was it the entire social security numbers that would have been accessible? Was it like business identifying information that was available? What was the personally identifiable information? And it is covered by Illinois' statute on this. And we actually, in that one instance, we found out they didn't need to send notification because there was no trigger of the notification laws in Illinois. So that's, but getting back to the cyber policies, that's that can help you get those people in place on day one, as opposed to you as a company suffer it. You're concerned, you kind of Google search certain vendors, and then you're paying for, like I said, things out of pocket, as opposed to sort of having a response mechanism in place, typically by a cyber policy that just gets you on the phone with those people the first day. I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, insurance carriers generally have preferred vendors that they'll give you a list when you buy a cyber insurance policy. Those vendors, because the insurance carrier is so big, generally speaking, have preferred prices for those. So if you're going to Google online because, oh no, a breach happened, they're going to upcharge you because they know you need it right now and you have nothing to do. So if you have that insurance carrier who has that incident response plan and team in place, you'll be able to get a better price for it.
The other thing you need to be prepared for, this is typical insurance, right? They may come and audit you and say, what do you have? And then based on what they find, say, well, this is how much it's going to cost, but if you do these two things, we can reduce your insurance fee.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is that, I'm leery of insurance in general.
Right.
So it's like, insurance for this, for that. And I just wanted to know how useful cybersecurity insurance is. And if it's, maybe like an extended warranty where it's like, once you get to that position, in that situation, that, oh, we only cover this and only that and only 10% and only that. Can you give me maybe a ballpark figure of maybe a business going through this and saying, well, don't expect the insurance to cover 100%. You're going to have to dish out several thousand.
You need to have a good broker who's looking over your policies, who understands the market.
Okay.
That being said, right now the insurance premiums vary on revenue, industry, controls in place. And what I'll say as a broker is that you can have all the cyber insurance you want, but that's not going to stop you from getting a breach. So you want to be able to look at the cost-benefit analysis, look at whether, how much money you want to put into a cyber insurance form, as well as how much money you want to put into vendors and assessments and fixing, your general IT and cybersecurity team in-house.
Yeah, as gentleman said, prevention can prevent a lot of issues after the fact. And I've commented about employees being the biggest culprits or the biggest cures for this. One episode in Indiana school system, their HR department got an email from the chief of the school system wanting complete all the data on the school system's employees, which, they're not an unusual request for the head of the school system to request that from HR. But the HR people thought it was kind of odd because the head of the school system, his office was right across the hallway from theirs. So one of the people in HR went over and said, Charlie, why didn't you just come over and ask for it? And Charlie looked at him and said, I never requested that. So somebody was spoofing his email address. They were going to send it to an email address that wasn't his. They were going to capture all of the employees' data. Okay, names, addresses, phone numbers, social numbers, all of the background data that the school system had. If that one HR person hadn't used a bit of common sense and said, this doesn't make any sense, he could have just come over and asked for it. So again, employees, good training, they can be cures for you or they can be the culprits. So, remember that. Detecting threats. Okay, just like that, good training, that employee used a certain amount of common sense and logic, detected that. Detecting email filters. Monitor the kinds of messages that you're getting and that. On the network, look for suspicious patterns or errors. Monitor the antivirus messages that you get. Monitor the disk health and utilization of your storage and that. So there isn't an accident and something escapes out of the system. And then finally, train the employees about what is a normal kind of response, a normal request, and what is out of the ordinary as this person had. Now, there are various detection types of situations or software that you can get. The IT people can help you with that, but a lot of it just is up to you and the users to look at what is typical and what's out of the ordinary. And if it's out of the ordinary, stop, step back, take a look and say, could this really be who they say they are, wanting what they want, that sort of thing. Okay, so you've done the identification, you've done the protection, you've done the detection and that, and then all of a sudden you have an intrusion. What do you say, what do you do after, oh my God? Okay? What happens if? Again, this is practice. This the benefit of having a plan. If you have a computer, if you have a system right now, go back and begin thinking about what would I do if I lost this hard drive, or if the information on my computer was not accessible, stolen, ransomware, whatever. Or what would I do if an employee walked off with a laptop that had all this data in it? So think about that, and then you think about how you would respond. Ransomware is in the news right now, so let's talk about ransomware. What happens if your computer is hit by ransomware? Okay? Various stories have come out. A number of companies have just decided it is easier to pay and get access to their data again, and that's one track to take. Other companies with suitable backups and suitable replacement parts have decided, sorry, we're not paying a darn thing. We'll load it on our new computer, and basically, sorry guys, you're not getting anything. Pros and cons to both those. Because if you pay, you're essentially telling the ransomware people, hey, this guy's willing to pay for data. Maybe in a month we ought to hit him again. So you're leaving yourself open. Plus the fact, yes, up until this point there seems to be, quote, honor among thieves. That most of the people that have been hit with ransomware actually did get the code to unlock their computer. Because, as I said, cybercrime is a business. These guys want to make money, okay? If you're paying them money, they're going to keep on doing it. So it encourages them. So you, in your own situation, you've got to go through your own mind how you want to do this. And to have options, you need to do what I talked about earlier. Back up your data. Have alternate means of looking at things. Now, if your computer is hit with ransomware and they want $5,000 and you have backed up data, is it cheaper to go out and buy a new PC? Those are some of the equations you have to balance. Yeah.
I had a problem with my computer one night, and kind of something, it's like a block or something. When I was actually talking to people, on the phone, forgot what had happened, but actually I was able to Google the information on how that lifted off my computer, because I couldn't get in and I couldn't get online, I couldn't do nothing, so everything was, pretty. I guess my future copy was blocked, but you can Google them and they show you pretty much how to do that.
Well, are you saying you were hit with ransomware, or it was just a
I don't know.
a glitch?
It was like about 1 some in the morning when that happened.
Yeah.
And they was trying to get money out of the people that I was talking to.
Yeah. Well, and again, cyber intrusion. A lot of people fake ransomware. I mean, if you turn your computer on and turn it off again, these fake screens might disappear. And that, there have been a couple of reports of that they're not really ransomware people. They just copy the screen. It's the same way that if you've ever gotten an invoice, a double invoice that looked real, somebody has copied all the screenshots and that, dropped it in, assuming that, and this is one of the scams against businesses that often happens. There'll be a bad actor that will get a hold of one of your invoices, either through dumpster diving or some way, copy, let's say, a vendor's name, address, logo, and all that, and send your billing department a receipt or an invoice. And if it isn't a huge amount of money, they'll probably pay it, except it'll go in the bad guy's direction rather than the vendor's direction. And the vendor then calls you up and say, hey, you never paid that invoice. And say, sure we did, here it is. That's not my invoice. So, people can copy things, and that's one of the, let's say, older scams that business owners need to be aware of, apart from cyber.
Again, coming from a technology background, and when you do backups, test them to make sure they work to restore. Because just because you have a copy doesn't mean it's going to work to be restored. So it's like the fire drills in grade school, right? We practice. So that's what you have to do is take your copy and have your tech people say, can you restore this? And how long does it take?
And these are all factors that you should consider put into the equation when you're balancing, let's say, response to a ransomware attack. Talking about that topic, there was an article. One company, after trying to figure out how to unlock their computers, decided, well, we'll just pay the ransomware. And they followed the instructions. And they were trying to figure out how to buy bitcoins and where to buy bitcoins. So a lot, again, as I said, a lot of these cyber criminals are business people. They will give pretty accurate instructions about how to do stuff because they want to get their money. It's amazing when you take a look at some of the screenshots that how exact they can be about giving you instructions on how you can pay to get your computer back. So it's one of those things that it's an equation. You have to balance what's most appropriate for you, if you have backup, if you have alternate computers, those sorts of things. But again, as Molly mentioned earlier, the notification of affected people, if data is stolen or is suspected to have been stolen, is now becoming a huge legal issue.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the example I gave was, that we had this small company, they had a laptop that was stolen. We walked through, what was protected, what was encrypted, who had access, what users had, access to this particular information. Really dove into the details with the client and figured out, what areas of information were potentially accessible or breached. And again, it was actually a situation where a laptop was stolen and it could have just been wiped clean and used as a Christmas present at that point because it was right around the holidays. But what if it wasn't? What if somebody, not only took the laptop but tried to access the information? What kind of legal trouble could you run into? So one of the first questions is, notification and what accounts do you have on your cloud? Are they only Illinois residents? Could they be in Indiana, other places in the Midwest? Are you dealing with banks that are nationwide? Like what laws, statutes, regulations are implicated by the potential breach? So like I said, in that first instance, we looked at it and we realized that because it was encrypted, because everything was password protected, double password and protected, password to get into the laptop, password to get into the cloud, and the amount of information that was available, they didn't have an obligation actually under the Illinois Personal Information Protection Act, they didn't have an obligation to notify the potentially breached individuals. Because even if the information was stolen, there wouldn't be enough there that would implicate people's PII. I've had a more recent situation where a client suffered a breach, and we did a whole forensic analysis with our outside contractor for them, and found out that there was probably about 12 to 15 files that were implicated. There was PII or sensitive information that was on there, and we were required to provide notification to those individuals by not only the Illinois statute, but then Indiana, because they had a couple of the files that were taken were from Indiana. So you have to look into state-specific requirements. Places like New York and California have very stringent requirements. So if you have a client's moved, we've talked about this too legally. If somebody moves to a different state, are you obligated to comply with the new state's requirements for notification, or is it really that they lived in Illinois, and that was what the account information was? So there's a couple of moving parts. But something else I wanted to mention was, since we had to notify these users this most recent time in my most recent instance, we also employed the help of a PR firm. Because not only is it, well, what are my legal obligations for notifying my clients or customers, but you also want to obviously have preserve your image in the notifying of these individuals, or if it gets even bigger or publicly accessible, local newspaper gets a hold of it, you want to make sure that the way you're describing what happened is in a way that's not overly dramatic and appropriate. Legally correct, but also, from a PR standpoint, appropriate. And even drilling down into the details of, if your company's breached, you don't send an email to your lawyers that literally has as a subject line like data breach or cyber attack. You've got to be really careful with the steps that you take immediately after it happens, not overreacting, but reacting appropriately. And the other thing that kind of comes into play for notification purposes is, do you have to notify the FBI or local authorities, and do you have to wait to notify your customers until they've completed their investigation, right? You don't want to have any sort of notification or start spreading the word, and then all of a sudden you're impacting the law enforcement's investigation into something. So there's many moving parts in the notification, and like I said, the first question really will be too, do you even have the obligation to send out notification under the state statutes that may be implicated?
So you can see that this is becoming a bit more complicated when you begin diving down. That's why this outline is simply that, an outline for bringing up other issues. And the final area that we want to get into is recovery, okay? You've identified, you've protected, you've detected, something has happened, you're responding to it, and the response has been good. You've either got a new computer, backed up, wiped off all the bad information. How do you recover? What do you do, and what have you learned? That's the important thing. As Molly mentioned, a lot of this, having a plan is one thing, learning from the actual implementation of the plan and seeing what works and what doesn't work. It shouldn't just be, well, okay, we cured it, let's move on. We've solved our problem. Now what did we learn in solving that problem? What should we be doing to avoid having the problem again? And that's where you can get, talk to the legal, the insurance people, the IT people to help you after the dust has settled and you have a moment of calm to try and figure out, okay, how do we move forward here? Now, I've got a couple of slides that just real quickly trace up, give you an example of what to do when something happens. Like in the identify, here we've got somebody who loses a cell phone. Okay, it's a cell phone. Employee has it. I have tablets, laptops, that sort of thing. What do you do to protect them? Screen locks, you've got passwords. How do you detect it? This is not always some software alarm. Again, training your people. the employee has to be trained to tell you, hey, boss, I lost my cell phone. I'm real sorry, but I lost it. Okay? It's better to have them tell you the truth than to cover it up for days and days. So, again, training issue. Employee gets a spare phone so he can keep on working. The password is changed in the system, so whoever has that cell phone now, and you got to assume somebody picked up that cell phone and is trying to use it. Maybe just as a new cell phone, maybe trying to get data from it. You don't have the luxury of thinking they're not going to try and steal something from you, so change the password, so they can't get in anymore. Employee replaces a cell phone. Phone app settings are recovered, and then the spare phone is brought back. That's the kind of process to be thinking about in something like hardware. We mentioned the cloud. The same thing can be done with the cloud, except a lot of this is now on the vendor's side. You need to make sure that the vendor, like the cloud vendor, the server farm operator, has processes in place and keeps you notified if they have a breach. And you, as a customer that whose data has been breached, then all of a sudden you're on the receiving end of the information rather than on the organizing end of sending information out. So they're from two different perspectives. A lot of this information and even more is available on a website. This is as a resource. It is bbb.org, Council for Businesses /cybersecurity, if you want to write that down. Or you can just go to bbb.org and search cybersecurity. But this is a direct link to that website. And it'll give you a wealth of information as well as other resources to use. Now, we've gone through the ideas behind this. We've looked at identity, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And that, again, it's an evolving program that you have to take a look at. You shouldn't just do it once and be satisfied with it. It needs to be revisited as software, as hardware, as cybercrime changes and improves. And essential to this is training. And employee training, as I mentioned a couple times, the employees need to be trained. You need to be trained so you know what to expect and the resources to use. So we'll open it up to general questions now, and Molly and I will be here for a while. Whatever questions you have, we'll be happy to respond to and give you our take on that.
I have 2 items to share with you. One of them is I suggest if you belong to a chamber of commerce or some professional association, why don't you demand of the leadership that once a year they give you an update on this moving target. That's really appropriate to serve you as a member. The second thing is, being a former math teacher and in technology, I want you all to know the Girl Scouts have a new badge now. They're teaching the girls computer cybersecurity. So you could just have it right in the family if the girls go to Girl Scouts and learn all about it.
Okay. Yes, there was a question here.
Do you have a resource that lists out all of these kinds of things besides the Better Business Bureau, like the regulations for the states? Is there something out there to help small businesses with that?
Well, it goes.
No, I was gonna say, I don't really know of anything in particular, but I mean, I'm sure if you just even did a Google search, there's gotta be sort of bullet points, but I would caution anybody against sort of trying to interpret what their requirements are for notification and if you did suffer a data breach, but there are people, companies in place that can help with, the main focus should really be on getting a response plan, reaction plan in place and making, training and educating employees and looking at, like I said, those contracts and relationships with outside vendors to minimize it when a breach happens, the response and the need to notify. But
site that has like the template for employee training?
Yeah.
Anything like that?
I don't know of anything offhand. I know our firm has done, actually, we've done our own internal audit. You know, it had actually an outside contractor come in and do a phishing, so a couple of phishing options into employees, like who's going to click on this. So it was very contained. That's obviously more than you're looking for. I don't know. Do you
My
have
company
a?
actually handles that type of stuff. I can provide with any resources. Everything I can provide.
What type of business do you have?
I'm actually an IT business. I just work
Okay.
on the street on stuff.
Yeah, I was going to mention on the BBB website, it has a list of resources with information on that, but it's oriented more towards what is available to help you begin planning. It's not specific like it has information from different governmental organizations, the FTC, that sort of thing, more of awareness and beginning. Really, you need to contact a lawyer, your IT provider, because now we're getting into the weeds of this and really getting down dirty about how to train. Not that you need to train now that you've accepted the idea of training, but where do we go for that training? How do we do it?
I'm working with, what we have in the city of Chicago is the #1 academy to train technology people in cybersecurity. It's a 2-year-old academy in the Merchandise Mart. And I am working with the founders saying we need to develop this training for non-IT people because they need to know what and how to do it. For example, you can't just go to any lawyer. She happens to know that you want, it's like going to a doctor. If I have a heart problem, I don't go to the foot doctor. You got to go to, that you need to know. You have to be an educated consumer on how to do these things. Because with this demand is growing, and the two founders are smart, so they're figuring out we need to do this to serve the business community.
Can you go back one slide so I can get the rest of
Oh.
the website?
Sure.
Now this here.
Yes, webcam cover. Okay, if you have a laptop that has a camera, people can hack into your laptop through Wi-Fi and turn on your camera and the microphone without you knowing it. Now, for a while when people found that out, all they did was put a piece of duct tape or masking tape over. This is a little more, let's say, attractive option to block the camera.
Now that blocks the camera, but it doesn't stop them from listening, right?
If you have your microphone activated, correct. If you have your microphone turned off, they can't activate the microphone. Yeah, that's the way I understand it. Yeah.
Can I give you a scenario, and you can help me kind of figure out the recovery. I was watching the news the other night, and this individual, it actually happened to her. She reported to that someone hacked her computer and pretended to be her friend who's sick, who she knows is sick. And the end of the short end of the story is he got $3,000 out of her.
Yep.
Just that quick. But my thing is now what her recovery, I guess, method was to call IT. Now, what if something like that happened to, someone that didn't go to IT? What's the next? Can you walk me through what would be?
Well, that's a variation on the classic impersonation scam. It's often referred to as a grandparent scam. That somebody will call up an elderly person that they found through Facebook or LinkedIn that has pictures showing them, and they're identified as, here I am with my grandkids. And the grandkids might be identified by name or not, and they say, Grandpa, phone call, Grandpa, can you, can I tell you something in secret I don't want anyone else to know? Well, Johnny, is that you? Yeah, it's Johnny. They didn't know Johnny's name. Now they got Johnny's name. Okay, and then, well, I'm in trouble. I took a ride from a friend of mine, and the police stopped us, and it turns out that my friend had drugs in the back of the car, and now I'm in jail. I need bond money. Okay? The whole idea behind any of these kinds of impersonation scams, and we're getting off, cybercrime now, but the whole idea behind these impersonation scams is to make the urgency the key thing, so that the person doesn't click in with common sense. Okay? You stop and say, hey, I won $3,000, or what was it, $3,000 or $5,000? $3,000. Anyone say, well, who the heck are you? And that sort of thing. So there has to be a backstory. What these scammers are great at is eliciting information to get their backstory. Saw how the guy got Johnny, and Johnny, where are you? Well, you know the trip I was taking, and sometimes the person will actually say, oh, you mean down to Georgia? I say, yeah, I'm in Georgia. Okay. Now, if the person is smart, they would have asked that leading question, knowing the kid never goes to Georgia. Okay. So, unfortunately, you have to be suspicious. You have to think, let's say, the worst rather than the best about, and it's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in today.
And it's very sophisticated. I mean, I think Mike was mentioning before, like, there's spoofing out there, right? You've got an email from somebody. I know a situation where, an executive assistant got an email that purported to be from the CEO of the company saying, hey, and she knew he was out of town. I need you to send me $3,000 because I've got to do this and that, and I'm meeting with so-and-so, and they're asking about their account and their bill and whatever. And it looked very right name, and there's only a slight modification to the dot. It wasn't .com, it was something else, right? Net maybe. And she wasn't savvy enough to really pick up on that. It was kind of his manner of speaking. They're like I said, sophisticated enough to know how to phrase it, know enough about the background, and can access it off a website about the company to sort of phrase it in a way. And sure enough, she wired $3,000 to what she thought was her boss, and then he came back and was like, no, I never asked for that money. And then the company has to try and figure out, how do you get that $3,000 back in the bank account, because that's long gone. And I think to respond to your question about how do you deal with that, I mean, that's why Mike was saying, there are, IT vendors and establishments out there to kind of help you with security, but it has to be constantly, audited and updated. Like, hardware needs to be updated, downloads need to be done to make sure that you have certain protections in place. But if it happens and you're basically the victim of a spoofing or a phishing effort by an outside person, it's very, very hard to sort of respond to it in what appears to be a common sense way, and then not have the fallout afterwards.
And this is where, again, training comes in, and looking at the normal business process. If in this situation the boss never asked for money before, and now all of a sudden he's asking for money, just like the school district said, why didn't the guy just come across the hallway? Why is he asking for money? He's never done that before. He has a corporate credit card. Ding. And so one way to do it is to call the guy up. And I don't know of any business owner who would be upset by an employee saying, hey, did you just call wanting $3,000? Or email me wanting $3,000? And no. Ooh, boss, somebody just sent me an email. Oh, thank you for saving me $3,000. So again, training, awareness, that's what.
One thing to watch out for, though, is they will send the number in that as well. So don't call, obviously, the number that they send, because we'll see that a lot. That's go back to the cyber insurance. Sometimes you can buy an endorsement that will actually cover that as well. It's called social engineering, or you can buy that on your crime policy. Something to look out for if you're transferring money often, if you have vendors that are taking credit cards and or changes in credit cards are being made. It's just something to look out for. But it's mostly has to do with the protocol that you have in place. Make sure you have a call number, make sure that you guys have back and forth communication and it's not all online. There's there's many different ways you can tackle it.
Yeah, what you bring up is very true, because we talked about spoofing emails that look actual, and then in the email they say, if you have a question about this, please call this number. Well, that's the scammer's number. Of course they're going to say, yes, this is authentic. So what you do is not pay off that, go back to previous invoices that you know are authentic and look at the number there, the phone number, and either compare the numbers, and if they're different numbers, or call them and physically say, hey, personal experience at the BBB. Several of the people got information from PNC Bank. Look damn authentic about not no longer being online banking and phone banking no longer being accessible on my account, and if you are interested, call this number. Called up PNC Bank, and they said, we're working on that already. It's a fake email, don't do anything, delete it, da-da-da-da-da, and that. So, it can be darn, very, very authentic, and be careful about taking action off of a questionable email.
And you know what, too, is that a lot of times what people don't do is they just read the email, but if you click on the sender, then you'll look to see, because, I mean, say for instance, an example like, Walmart. I have a credit card with Walmart or something, and I've been told that I won $5,000. Well, then I'm going to look at the sender, and it's like, is it Walmart at walmart.com or whatever? And if it's just mumble jumble, then
You can also pass your cursor, move your cursor over to the address. If it's a semi-professional scammer, moving your cursor over to the sender's address may show up an email that is different than the email that is shown in the sender's block. Okay? If you understand what, move the cursor over above that email address, and if you get a different address than what is shown, very questionable. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my question, I've got a couple calls this week from someone saying that they were monitoring my computer through the Microsoft, and that there was something wrong with my computer, and they wanted to fix it and wanted me to run to my computer right there. So I just took their information and said, I'll call you back. But it was just interesting that, and then they called me back again, because I've turned that type of call in to the state's attorney before,
Okay.
and then it stopped, and then it's like it's starting again. So obviously, can someone actually monitor your computer if it's going off? Can somebody really do that, or there's just some ways they get you to go to your computer so they can control it or something?
If you give access to a computer technician, I forget, there's a software that allows them to access your computer if you allow it. Okay? This is typically for an off-site computer technician to analyze what's going on in your computer and help you, let's say, make it run faster or eliminate a virus, something like that. Now, I don't want to confuse the good guys with the bad guys. The vast majority of those kind of calls, the vast majority of those kind of calls are scammers. It really takes a high level of expertise to get into a computer without the person's knowledge. And if they're getting into your computer without your knowledge, and they're that high level of expertise, they're just trying to get you to do something. They are not a, chances are you would not be essential to an international cybercrime syndicate. You're one computer.
Right.
Okay.
So like, just real quick, now if someone had, when it's taken on your, or what do you call it, a ransom? And you said you
Ransomware.
just change computers, does that mean that and you just get a new computer, so that means that laptop is no good, or what can you There's nothing you can do with that, you have to just throw it away.
Well, I mean, if the hard drive in the computer has, the files have been locked, and that, talking from a hardware perspective, you can take that hard drive out and replace it. Now, sometimes it's worthwhile, sometimes it's not, because if the computer is a few years old, it's probably going to cost as much as the computer's worth to replace the whole thing. So you might as well buy a new one. But as I said, the secret with a backup is, one, to have it backed up and then disconnect it, and to make sure that whatever is backed up, as the lady back there said, that it can be recovered off of your backup. And that's where your IT people come in, to make sure that what you've saved in a portable hard drive, sometimes no bigger than a cell phone, can actually be reloaded onto the computer.
So if they captured your information, they still have it, even though you don't.
What? See, that's one of the questions that's sometimes not known with ransomware. Are they just locking your computer and looking for the dollars, or did they lock your computer and are covering up a theft of data with ransomware? That's where the forensic computer people come in and determine, well, they did copy it before locking it. It's getting really messy.
Well, that's sort of like when you hear the big, what was a film, it was one of the recent entertainment companies had their information, movies taken, and it was going to be leaked unless you paid, and that was a ransomware situation. Well, obviously they are taking the stuff out, likely will put it out there even if you do pay them. So that, you kind of have to figure out, like Mike said, as to whether it's simply just been locked away and they're not doing anything with it, they're just waiting for the money, or they're going to, expose some information that's highly sensitive. So.
Yeah.
How much does it typically cost to have IT come in after an incident and, determine what, whether data was compromised and to what extent and things like that? I hear it's really, really expensive.
I mean,
I couldn't tell you. I don't know that.
So, I mean, there's lots of, from my experience, like companies and vendors out there that do specialize in this. And something that we always make sure that we do as counsel for companies is, ask the vendor, the forensic analyst, to give you a statement of work. Like, what's the scope of what you're going to look into? You kind of work with them, and then give me a budget or estimate of how much that's going to cost. Once you hit that amount, let's see where you're at, and then, if you want to increase or expand what we're having you look at. So you don't just kick the door wide open and say, yeah, we've been breached, come in here and take a mirror image of our hard drives and figure out what's been done, and there's no reins kept on what the scope of what's going to be done is. So I think from my experience, if I make sure that my clients are communicating with me and we're communicating with a forensic analyst as to here's the scope of work of what we're expecting, here's what we know internally from what we've looked at with our IT folks, you can keep the cost down that way. And it's really getting to the point of where you have that comfort level of, okay, we've looked at everything, or we've looked at what we think could have been breached. That can help to keep the cost down. But there's really no way of saying, like, oh, it's going to be $10,000 or $5,000 or $1,000. But and again, sometimes it's that one incident that I was talking about, where the laptop was stolen. The vice president of the company, was an IT, tech support guy in his past life. So he was able to look into a lot of that stuff ahead of time. He went in remotely and changed passwords and cut off users and moved stuff around before we were even called. And in that instance, we didn't have to use a forensic analyst because we were able to work with him. But it really depends, and just how broad it is, and really where you hit your comfort level of, we've looked into this as much as we are legally and from a public relations standpoint required to do.
Yeah, and that brings up the point of the benefits of training ahead of time and having a plan ahead of time rather than waiting for something to happen and then scrambling. Even if you've got the bare bones of a plan, it might just be who to contact if, or talk to your attorney, talk to your IT provider, tell them, okay, if this happens, who would you call? How would we get there? Talk to them, get some kind of a statement of, a plan from them. What would they do and an estimate? With the understanding, things change, but at least you'll know if it's going to be 1,000 or 10,000. And then you've got a certain comfort factor there because you've at least looked at it and you're somewhat prepared.
And don't let it be static. At least once a year, review what your response plan is.
Yep.
Make sure that, even the employees that are in your company that are part of that response team are still employed there and that they're brought up to speed and some of these new, because cyber attacks are changed. I mean, the sophistication is so great that there's always a new malware or ransomware or, cyber attacks or a threat out there that people are staying up to date and having, sort of the preliminary and minimal even protocols in place, and that those are all kept up to date on a yearly basis. Don't
be surprised if you see variations upon a theme. Like I said, the impersonation scheme can be called the grandparent scheme if they call grandparents. It can be called the sick person scheme if somebody knows that you're sick and needs some money. I mean, these guys are creative. Unfortunately, they're very creatively bad. So you've got to have some common sense and awareness. Yes, sir.
I would recommend that you print out that incident response plan because if your computer is locked up.
Hey, good idea, and maybe even put it on a flash drive or something that you can take home with you in case. Yes. Yeah, it's locked
print it
up.
out and pin it to your corkboard in your office. Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. Other questions?
Just a quick clarification. So not really someone can really monitor your software, saying that your software is out of order or it's sending out messages. That's something that some strange person can't really do.
In the vast, vast, vast majority of cases, no. A personal computer is not worth that level of expertise for a person with that level of expertise to get into. And that they would much rather go after the United States government if they're able to do that. Have that level of expertise.
I was going to say, I get those same calls, I've gotten them in the past, and usually I just start messing with those people on the phone and say, hey, what version of Windows am I running, or I'm running on a Mac, or they usually start changing what they're talking about, and then you can tell they're kind of full of it, they don't know what they're talking about, and they just say, all right, take me off your list, I'm calling you again.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting. If you want more information, there are the handouts here from the Better Business Bureau, from Smith Amundsen. I gave you a couple of resource pages to take a look at off the BBB website. Go there if you're interested in pursuing this idea and getting additional information. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the City of Chicago for hosting this.